Hi, and welcome back to the Apprentigo podcast. I'm your co-host Hader, and I'm joined today by Carlo. Let's meet our guest.
So, today we are joined by the boy wonder, Hamza, who is a solicitor apprentice at Norton Rose Fulbright. For those who aren't aware, Norton Rose Fulbright is the law equivalent of what Google is in tech. Hamza has a very interesting story. He was going to be a doctor studying at Cambridge, but thought, you know what, I would like to become a solicitor instead, and chose to go for a degree apprenticeship. So, Hamza, what brings you here today?
I was very fortunate to get an invitation from the Apprentago hosts, and here I am.
So I think going back to school is always an interesting point when it comes to people thinking about their careers and their choices and things like that. So take me back to around sort of GCSEs and A levels. What was going through your mind in terms of careers you were thinking about and just your general experience, I guess, with school at that point?
So I think growing up, careers-wise, I'd always been interested in healthcare. It was the main sort of career that I had real connections with. I knew friends whose like fathers and stuff were doctors. And in terms of all the other, typical ethnic professions, which the communities really emphasize, those are your stuff like law, finance, and engineering. But from my own world impression of them, the only thing I really knew was high street solicitor firms, the people working in banks, when you go cash in some money. And in terms of engineering, I knew literally no one. So in that regards, like healthcare was the most, clearest track for me. And I'd always been interested in sciences. It was always a point of interest. So therefore, when it meant that I was pursuing, GCSEs, A levels, science is always something that I was quite keen to incorporate within them. And I was very fortunate actually at the end of year 11 to go have a 2 week work placement at UCLH. So that's a hospital in Euston. And I was very fortunate for the 2 weeks to shadow a lot of the consultants there. So people who had 10, 15 years of experience in the profession. So to me at that time, it was like, I was achieving, I was on the correct path. Everything was making sense. Everything was clicking together. I think behind the veil, if I, especially now when I reflect, there was a lot at works that was slowly already like deterring me away from the medical profession. And it's completely personal to me. For other people, it naturally makes sense. But in terms of like the work-life balance, I was getting a lot of, strong recommendations from the doctors, from the consultants to really think about that balance. Night shifts and stuff is a common occurrence that, you don't really have the flexibility, and especially you have to be on campus, on site. So I think as a family man, it's a very strong core value that's been like raised and instilled in me. So
Yeah. What shocked you from that 2 week experience, particularly when you're a student? It's very easy to have an image in your mind of what a career is. Was there something that you feel is important, for example, for our viewers and our listeners who might also be thinking about a career potentially in medicine, that you feel would be key to share as almost like an instant, not deal breaker, but just a very important piece of information that you'd only really get having that experience? Because let's be honest, not everyone is fortunate enough at that age to get that direct experience. So it'd be great to share a bit of advice on your end.
so our generation benefits a lot from living in that digital age. So I think a lot of people have already heard the stereotypes slowly be broken down. We know that doctors work long hours. We know that they're not well compensated, for the work that they do. So I won't really touch into that. That's stuff I imagine students are already aware of. I think for me, the main takeaway was that it wasn't as, soul-fulfilling as I had hoped it to be. It was the main thing that really drew me into medicine. It was that altruistic nature that I was really keen to, look forward to. And in terms of like religion and like those sort of moral values and stuff, it was the perfect profession in that sense. But going there, I think the two main things was that there was a lot of repetition in terms of cases, and because there was a lot of repetition, because of the high volume of patients, and especially now, that was 3-4 years ago, but nowadays the state of the NHS, the waiting times, the queues, it was much more of a conveyor belt sort of process. We didn't really get the time to really speak through like a patient's concerns. And I guess when you're getting the same sort of like symptoms, same sort of problems again, and you lose that personal element to it, it does really become like work. And I think that's a shame because there's so much going into it. You're dealing with another person's fears, and to you, they've just become some points on a page.
Yeah, I think getting that experience, especially at that time, is very essential. So my advice, especially if you're I'd say like in year 12 or around the sort of GCSE time frame, really key to try and get exposure to the careers you're thinking about, because the idea of it could be very different to the reality. And I guess that's part of the beauty of apprenticeships as well, is that you're seeing the reality of the career as well as the kind of theoretical world and how you think it might be in your head.
And adding to that, I've just got to say that in a lot of healthcare profession jobs, a lot of people see it as, oh, you don't get a lot of money, but the people who want to do them kind of jobs don't do it for the money. They do it for that justice-driven, I want to help people. And that's what other people do it for. And that's such a commendable thing. But not everyone has that. And if they do, then they have to realise that the healthcare medical profession isn't actually fair. Like you said, you're not giving bespoke care as such to every person. Especially on an A&E ward, it's more like tick a box, go out, tick a box, go out. But that's not the doctor's fault, because the doctor themselves probably doesn't want to do that. They want to give care and attention to every patient, but it is so difficult. And I think being exposed to that at a young age probably saved you a lot of time, because right now you might have been at your medical degree and finished and thought, I don't actually want to do this.
I think the two main things was that hearing from actual doctors and stuff, one key takeaway was that the current state is that management isn't necessarily medical professionals, and oftentimes because of the state of the healthcare system right now, you're often pushed in at a junior level into perhaps roles and responsibilities that you don't have the necessary experience for, and that's quite daunting. It's a very real reality that people do die on wards, and that's the nature of like the profession. So I think that responsibility element is something that I definitely recommend viewers to take away with them. And the other element as well is that finances are important. They might not be the be all and end all, and I would recommend that they're not the be and end all for most people, but it's really important, because when you do see that your peers who have put in perhaps less time in the education system, they might have only done 3-4 year degrees and they're earning 2 to 3 times your salary. You really have to be a specific type of individual who that doesn't leave a bitter taste in your mouth. And I think a lot of my friends now who are at UCL and studying for medicine is leaving second doubts in their mind.
And that's just in the real world. You go on Instagram and you see some kid making millions off crypto, you're going to think to yourself, what's the point in doing this? And that there's a fine line between chasing money and chasing progression. I've always said that progression is a long road and money is just a signpost that you are going to pass when you go through that. So moving on to obviously why you chose to do a solicitor apprenticeship, how did you find it? Because law apprenticeships are really popular, but how did you find it?
So at the time, there was no one in my sphere, my network, that knew of legal apprenticeships. It was completely by chance. So as we've sort of gathered, I've switched from medicine to law, and that really happened because there was an organisation known as Uptree. I had accidentally signed with them, and they were doing an event at a firm at the time known as Denton's. The event was actually mainly catered towards people aspiring to pursue law at university. I applied, and I was very fortunate to be one of the 15 or 20 so students that were selected. And a lot of the people from the cohort have now gone on to do great things. They're now solicitor apprentices themselves, or they're at some of the top leading establishments. But the very end of that session ended with Denton's advertising their solicitor apprenticeship scheme. And at the time, I was quite on the university track. It was an afterthought. It was something that was never mentioned to me, and I wasn't even really concerned with the law profession in general. It was only months after that when I made the switch to law, and I was thinking about professions, and I was sort of uncontent with the offers I had at the time. I had UCL and LSE, but I didn't really see the benefit of pursuing a university degree to myself personally. What really spurred me on was that I then got a notification email saying, are you sure, here's a reminder about an application for our program. And that led me to do the Google search, fourth page, way into the night, where I was finding all the different firms opening. I was very fortunate to have, I didn't necessarily have mentors in that sense. None of my family were connected to the legal profession and stuff, but what I did have was drive, and I had LinkedIn. And we're all obviously LinkedIn professionals now. But at the time, all I was doing was I was reaching out to people at the firm saying, look, I'm applying to this scheme. I would love to hear your insights. What's the culture like at the firm? I keep hearing this buzzword. Could you tell me a bit about it? And that really helped me because, I really believe in the idea that it takes a village to raise a child. And my whole application process, I was self-taught, but it was that village of mentors and connections that was really teaching me how to refine my applications.
And I think there's so many things that I'd like to touch on. I think the first one is, if you're an employer, the touch point you have with students before they make critical choices like university is so key. You can have a domino effect with their career trajectory and pick up on amazing talent like Hamza, who potentially could have gone down the traditional university pathway. And that's not to say he wouldn't have been successful at university. It's just that he saw something that was very different and wanted to combine the best of both worlds. So I think that's super key. And I think the other thing that you touched on that is really important is having the support from the village of people around you in terms of mentoring, particularly when you don't have connections. Like, I've personally been there. It's so hard to try and find that exposure. So if you feel you're a young person who you just feel like you're so disconnected and everyone has all the right people in the right places, LinkedIn is a very, very good enabler for you to put yourself out there and be able to make connections that you might struggle to make in real life, but they can lead to offline conversations and, advice at the right time that will really help you in the long run. So yeah, those are two really key points I think I just wanted to highlight from what you said.
And adding to that, so you've applied, right? Go on the 4th page on Google, but you would think, big firm, lots of money, they could optimize the SEO and be top page, but they're not. So you apply. What's the interview like? Because the thing is that surely they're used to interviewing grads who have a basic knowledge of the law. They've done a degree. They probably show a specific pathway they're trying to specialise in. You probably have done. Did you do law at A level?
No, I did not.
Okay, so what did they expect you to know, and what did they ask you?
So the one thing that I really want to open up to people, even people who pursue university and stuff, is that law firms don't require you to do a law degree. You can do history and then do something known as a conversion. So very similar, these recruiters, the partners and stuff at the firm, they're very much aware that not everyone has like a legal background, even if you've gone to university.
Yeah.
In terms of the process, so when I was applying, I'd made the switch from medicine to law and I'd made it relatively late. This was around February time, and applications for most apprenticeships open in September and shut around January. So I was only dealing with around 5 or so firms, and now I think there's like 20, 25 firms on offer. So I was applying quite late. I was learning as I was going along, and in terms of the interview process, as you mentioned, it's quite drawn out. So it starts with an application stage. This is, 3 typical questions. It might be why law, why the firm. It might be a business question. Tell us something that's happened that might impact our firm. After that, they sift through the applications. They see whose writing style do they like, who's hitting all the key points, who's got that information there. Then it moves on to a telephone interview. This can be done either virtually or, it could be done actually by telephone. And there's also a psychometric test. So it varies between firms. The typical law one is the Watson-Glaser, which is absolutely horrendous.
What is a psychometric test for people at home? Because that's a word that's getting thrown around more and more for degree apprenticeships. Definitely. It's making degree apprenticeships versus university separate psychometric tests. On my TikTok, people tell me all the time, I can't pass the test. So what is a psychometric test?
So a psychometric test, and you get this even at the graduate level, so if you go through university and stuff, it's really testing your written capabilities, your maths capabilities, your logic, like how do you understand things? And it's done through like so many different ways. Some firms do it by a game system. So literally you're playing maze games and, all the old typical games that you play on your phone, they've just tried to gamify it in a way and then really like see based on your scores, do you fit within? Mm-hmm. There's other ways. So for example, the Watson-Glaser is a series of text-based questions that you get asked. It's like, which of these options are an assumption? Which of these is a presumption? Which one is missing, logic to their statement? Which one is an overgeneralization of an idea?
Yeah, one thing I want to touch on is, did you feel prepared for psychometric tests? Because me personally, I had not a clue. I just felt like I was a deer in headlights, because the main reason I failed all my apprenticeship applications was because I was so unprepared with the psychometric test.
Right.
Do you have any advice for people who are just like, how the hell do I prepare for this? Because it's almost like a mini exam in a way.
Yeah.
Did you feel like you had access to resources to help you prepare, or did you feel like you were relying on your skills from school to be able to do well in that?
Definitely not skills from school. I think it's a very, very different sort of testing method. And the way the school system is obviously you have a textbook, you have, resources that that this is the main content that you're going to be tested on, whereas this is complete variety and you've never seen the question type before and it's quite randomized. A lot of firms might offer you like a mock in terms of like they have a link to a preset that you can use, and that's quite helpful. Google is such a powerful tool, and as mentioned, like LinkedIn's a really powerful tool. So at the time there was no body that was really like helping and stuff. Obviously I've helped create ACE where we do support applicants with psychometric tests, guiding them through the process. But for me at the time it was a lot of like YouTube searching. So I'd literally take whatever test they've used. So if they've said Watson Glaser, and I type that into YouTube and see has anyone done a YouTube video on it, is there a tutorial on it. Does it really help? I actually found that doing the mock once and then trying not to overthink it was the best method. But that's because I am quite a critical overthinker. And with these tests, because the difference between options are so thin, so narrow, you can really like shoot yourself in the foot if you think too much on it. So sometimes it's about being bold and brash and just going following your gut instinct. But I've mentored applicants, and I know for some of them, watching the YouTube tutorials and stuff that I mentioned was really, really helpful for them. So it definitely varies.
So now what a lot of people probably want to think is, day one, you've passed your interview, what do you do? What is it like walking through them doors? All right, have you got people barging past you? Is everyone really out for themselves? Did you have to order a Hugo Boss suit? What was it like?
I did not have to order a Hugo Boss suit, especially post-COVID and stuff. Suits are becoming less and less common. Because law is a traditional industry, you still have them when you visit like clients for the client functions, but it's very much a dress for your day. So people are wearing, like sort of laid back clothing,
like Crocs.
Not that laid back. Although the banking teams, I've heard questionable things about them. But in corporate, we keep it nice and classy. But in terms of first day atmosphere, Norton Rose Fulbright has the most beautiful offices. It's London Bridge, right next to Tower Bridge. Pure glass building, and when you walk, I remember walking and they have like a little garden in front, and it's meticulously like kept. And I think because it's right next to EY and PwC, and it's such a touristy area within itself, it's never hectic and bustling like that, but it's always so well maintained. And I think it's a real privilege to have that walk towards the office, see the glass buildings and see the name in front, Norton Rose Fulbright. And I remember walking in and it was literally me playing the Suits theme in my head, like the Greenback Boogie. And I was like, wow. But no, it's truly an incredible experience. And the first day we went up the glass elevator, the partner was talking about Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. And I think there's just a moment where you're just trying to sink it and absorb it in. And I think, it's a shame that a lot of professionals in general, they become acclimatized to it. But I think for me, it's really important to every few weeks, whenever I'm in the office, just to take a moment and think like, this is worlds apart to whatever I've known.
And I would say that mentality probably must be quite good for your degree, just to reflect on what you're doing, because you're in a very unique situation that a lot of people would like to be in, but not a lot of people do. So a question I've got for you is, okay, you're in a law firm, you're doing stuff. What is it like working with a solicitor at 18 years old? You're walking, what are they like?
They're a bunch of characters. No, it's a whole like mix of personality types. You have some really senior professionals who have been at the firm 40, 50 years. They were there when everything was paper-based. They were there with the advent of technology. They were, and they're still here and they're still market leading. So it's incredibly humbling to be sort of like around them, to like see how their mind works, because they are the people literally navigating, what's the new form of contract? How does this legislation impact things? Can we actually do this merger? So a merger is obviously when two companies join together. So a lot of the deals that stop happening is actually because they're advising against it. So it's incredibly humbling in that sense. And you get to see like the difference in mindset as well. I think a lot of the new generation, the way that we sort of look at the world is so different to how they might have perceived it. Because in terms of like workload and stuff, the work expectations and that balance aspect, it's just really interesting to see how the perspectives mesh together.
Yeah, I think just for context for our viewers, so Hamza is studying for a law degree, the same as any other law degree in terms of, and he will avoid the competition of training contracts, which is a very, very competitive sort of part of trying to become a solicitor for most graduates. Because of the solicitor apprenticeship he's on, this is something we touched on in one of our earlier episodes as well, is that you're guaranteed to get to the profession that you're aiming for, because everything is like a start to end track or pathway. And Hamza's actually the first solicitor apprentice, part of the first cohort. So for him, it was very new to him. He didn't necessarily have people who'd walked that path before him. So he's a trailblazer in his own right. But he touched on something earlier, which I'd like to come back to, is ACE, he mentioned. So ACE Insights is an organization that Hamza co-founded, where he's trying to level the playing field and help students. So Hamza, tell us a little bit about ACE Insights and the work you're doing as well.
So I just wanted to mention briefly, I'm the first cohort at Norton Rose Fulbright, so I've been very fortunate to like interact with people way before me. Holly Moore, for example, was like the very first Solicitor Apprentice. So it's been interesting to navigate my own pathway because it's quite unique, but I also benefit from my predecessors.
Yeah, absolutely, because whilst there are solicitor apprentices older than you, they're not in the same firm. So you've got some elements of potential guidance and mentoring, but for the company you're in, you are basically the first. You're the blueprint, right? You're gonna set the precedent. So how's that been?
That's, you know what, I'm incredibly privileged to have that opportunity, because I think it allows me to shape an entire program around, you know, how I feel like it works best. It's really unique being the first cohort, because I think you're really on level playing field with the people organizing the program. They're really keen to hear insights, and I think that's a shame when, you know, programs become 4 or 5 years and when they're entrenched into what works already. They're less open to innovation. Whereas, you know, being the first cohort, we're testing out, okay, can we do an international secondment in this year? Can we go? So secondment is an opportunity to go like abroad, essentially. And you also have clients secondments, which is an opportunity to go to the client's office. So we're working out, when can we do it? What clients would work best for us? You know, how often should we rotate around teams? Do you need one mentor? Do you need 7 mentors? You know, do you need a mentor? So it's really interesting to have that support and have that eagerness from a firm. And
is that, would you say, being the sort of trailblazer, is that what inspired you to set up ACE Insights? Or
definitely. We've touched upon it already. I was very fortunate that by complete chance I found out about the law. And that was just the law as an entire field, like, you know, different from the high street solicitors I knew of. But in terms of the apprenticeship opportunity, once again, it was a fortune off of a fortune. You know, having that one small segment that mentioned it. So what ACE really does is that I was very lucky to meet figures in their own respects who were massive in their space. One figure was Omer Tanvir at BT. I'd seen him on the billboard and stuff, and I knew he'd be a very inspirational figure, and he always took the time to speak with mentees. And equally, you know, Amna, who was on the podcast previously, Aisha, who's now the head of the EY Muslim Network, Iman, you know, so many fantastic people in the ACE team. And together, what we really saw was that there's this epidemic of people who have questions that need to be answered. And I think, as you can appreciate, as we get busy within our careers, it's quite difficult to single-handedly respond to each question. I've been very privileged for, you know, 3 years to still have some sort of like mentoring program where I reach, like, you know, students reach out to me and I can support them and I can put them in contact with the right people, because now I've established my own network. But what ACE really looks to do is to solidify that and to make it geographically blind, in the sense that, you know, it doesn't matter if you're from the same borough as I was, or it doesn't matter if you're from the other part of London, we still want to give you opportunities. And there's so many boroughs that are untouched. They've never heard of the word apprenticeship. Or if they have heard of it, it's plumbing and electrical.
And exactly, they just see it as like, oh, apprenticeship, plumber, oh, tradie, that's what they do. And that's very commendable. I think really, really commendable thing to. Not a lot of people would do that, especially when, let's be real, right? On average, how many hours do you work? Before you answer that, I've heard stories of people that they go in at 8 o'clock in the morning, they leave at 11 p.m. at night, and they're back in the office for 8 again. And I understand that you are a junior, right? But you must have had a taste of that, all whilst going for your degree.
I think the degree element particularly, based on, you know, how I've always treated my academics at A-levels, at GCSEs, that I put a lot of pressure on myself. So in the degree element, it easily bleeds over into my like weekends, into my evenings and stuff, and that's just the nature of it if you want to achieve like the highest. I know people who are very like strict. They have a study day, they only work on the study day, nothing more, nothing less. So it definitely depends on the candidate. But in terms of the long hours and stuff, I'm very fortunate that my providers very aware, very like considerate and very concerned about our well-being and stuff. So our hours are for the most part protected. You do have the element where a part of you wants to work a bit more, and that's just the nature of working on some of like the world's leading deals. When you see companies that you grew up with and you're working on those projects, you want to be part of every moment. And I think that's when the apprentice really has to decide, am I happy enough to blur that boundary? Will I be able to come back from it? And I've been very lucky to always have been able to have that strong communication with my like supervisors, and I've always had my enthusiasm matched like very positively.
Yeah.
But I know at other firms it's not the case.
So, again, that's a really good answer. I like that. So, question that a lot of people want to know is well, no one really knows because no one's really finished your specific apprenticeship. Where are you projected to be when you finish your apprenticeship program? And also, how long is it?
The program is 6 years long. Yes, I know, very, very long. But in terms of how it matches up, how it marries up with the traditional route, it's the exact same. You would do 3 years law school typically. You would do 1 year like specific law training, and then you'd have the 2 years training contract, which is obviously what Haydar alluded to earlier. But for me, we do 4 years law school, and then we have the training contract incorporated at the end. So exactly the same. The only difference is that because we have it incorporated, our scheme is 6 years, whereas typically if you went to university, you wouldn't call it 6 years.
Question I would ask, a lot of parents are probably thinking, okay, I want my child to go to Cambridge to do law. I know they're going to be taught by people who have been lecturing this subject for many, many, many years. What are your lecturers like at your university? Are they kind of different? Because you're in this real world environment. I know that a lot of apprenticeship degrees, an example is computer science, has been basically transformed into something called digital technology solutions, which basically gets rid of all the theory part and gets straight into the doing.
Right.
So is your, version of the law degree you're doing, no matter that it does have the same outcome as someone else, is the curriculum the same?
The core curriculum is the exact same. There's certain modules that you have to do to qualify as a solicitor in England and Wales. And that's like contract law, it's like public law. Those are the sort of modules that you're looking at, and that would be the same for near enough every single university in the country. So you'd also do that at Cambridge and Oxford. In terms of how the lecturers are, how they compare, and the differences, I think at university you have a bit more variety. You can pick up elements of law that you're actually interested in. So if you're interested in immigration law, family law, that's not an opportunity that you have necessarily as a solicitor apprentice. Obviously you could do it in your own time, but who wants to be studying on top of studying? But in terms of like quality and stuff, I think my best learning comes from actually on the job. And I don't think that's something that's replicable in the university environment by any way, means or form. Even if you took those same individuals and put them into a university environment, it wouldn't be as comparative to the learning that an apprentice gets. As mentioned, the people I work with are world leading. They are the go-to people for like those type of deals. They're the go-to people for that entire area of work. And you get to work with them and you get to see exactly how they work, the systems that they operate. Are they a person that gets up like 6 a.m. in the morning? They, work like a horse until the evening. Are they a person who, relies very heavily on their juniors? Are they someone that, condenses and does it all by themselves? You get to sort of learn their habits, and, not everything will match up exactly with how your own worldview is, what you like and how you like to work. But there's a lot of advice, and they always talk about learning through osmosis, but there is an element of that where you get to pick up the habits and see what works for you.
And touching on projects and cases, obviously without going into explicit details, what are some of the most memorable projects that you've been involved in?
Memorable projects, so we've done a lot of world leading work. I think for me there's been 2 massive projects, but the one thing I want to mention is that in my first 8 months at the firm I didn't touch a single piece of domestic work. So domestic meaning UK. So everything I was doing was like global. It was, Ethiopia, and it was, Mogos, and it was, Zimbabwe, like all over the world, Dubai. In terms of the memorable deals, one of them was, it's really complicated. There's something known as P&I, and that's a type of insurance, and you typically have it in like shipping. So boats, naturally, they have a charter, they need to be insured. Something goes wrong, just in general, is how
like how that big ship last year just got stuck for 5 days.
Yeah, the Suez Canal.
Like that, okay.
So there's a lot of insurance elements, and because it's such a big industry that they have dedicated insurers for that, And in the world, there's 13 massive ones. So imagine that they rule the seas, is like the way I like to think about it. And two of them are merging together. So if you have, only 13 of these type of companies really in the world, and two of them merging together, it's a massive momentous deal. And to work on that deal as a junior, there was press releases. I had my name in like all the news outlets and stuff. So it was really exciting for that element. And then there's another one. It involved like a company I knew since like very young. I got to meet the directors, so they flew over from the country. We had breakfast, we had lunch with them. There was a celebration signing deal. It was $1 billion in terms of like value and stuff. The contract was worth so much, and it was like the first private telecom network that they were creating. So that was an incredible experience.
And would you say that, let's be real, at this point in time, you are probably in history, your cohort and the young generation of today, the youngest legal professionals, you could say, at the moment, because no one who is younger than you or less qualified than you can go into a law firm and do what you're doing. And being where you are, like, would a graduate be exposed to a similar opportunity as this? Like, say you did your law degree and you joined, would you have been exposed if you was in the same moment in time to that opportunity or not? Do you feel as you're an apprentice you'd get a bit of special treatment?
So, it's always controversial. To me, I do feel like there's a spotlighting as an apprentice. I think you have to make use of it, and you do have to like champion your own voice. But the firm understands that it's such young talent, and they're really keen to like invest into it. I've been very fortunate to go to Cambodia with the firm to be a global ambassador for our charitable causes, and that was just me, shouting and screaming about the fact that I am one of the advocates from the firm at one of its youngest stages. I do a lot of our insight days and stuff. And, the charitable element was something that initially attracted me to the firm. And that was, a large part of my pitch for being a global ambassador. And then to be involved in the fundraising, to fundraise in the six figures, and then to go and like actually see the project on the ground was incredible. And I don't know if I would have had that experience as a trainee just because of how busy you'd be, how much concern and stress there is about will I get the job offer at the end. Whereas as an apprentice, you can afford to appreciate the moments that you're living in.
Yeah. Being an apprentice is such an unfair advantage. You are in a very unique position. You're this shiny new mystical thing. You're like this unicorn when it comes to like education and talent for a company. Because it's so new, you can really drive how you capitalize on that opportunity because you get what I would call a first mover advantage. So you are getting to shape it how you want. The same way at university, you can get involved in all these different societies and things like that. Companies also have different things that you can get involved in. For example, charity was something that was important to Hamza. So he leaned into that side of it. As an apprentice, there's so much you can get involved in. From personal experience, I felt that I really got that unique exposure to things that I probably wouldn't have at university. And again, because it's within a business setting, you get to make more impact, in my opinion, because you're not having to build your own resources. You're using an established network, a company that's been around for so long and has got all the things in place to make it easier for you. They just need you to just go out and do it, right? Definitely. So really emphasize the point of being that being an apprentice is such a huge unfair advantage because you're learning and anything you do is impressive to the employer, but at the same time they also acknowledge that you're not going to know everything, so you kind of get the best of both.
And adding to not knowing everything, you must have met, does the Harvey Specter figures from Suits exist, or are they hard to come by?
They definitely exist. Depending on the firm as well, you probably get more of them. Essentially, what the Harvey Specter figure is to me is someone that's top of their field. They're a well-known name, and they work on all the biggest deals, and they earn a lot of money. That definitely exists. Do I think it's reflective of the life of a lawyer? Elements are, you do fly like first class and stuff for certain clients. If you're working on those $1 billion deals, you will be flying first class. You do have, so our team dinner was to Hakkasan. So, a Michelin star dining restaurant experience at like a very young age was not something that would ever be on the cards for me unless I was in the law field. So there are elements of it. Do I think, it's feasible though for like everyone? Well, the one thing I've always said is that yes, there's Harvey Specter elements to it, but there's also equally Mike Ross and Lewis Litt type of elements to it. When you look at Lewis Litt as a figure, he's always working. He's a very technical individual, and you get those figures as well in the law firm. People who have incredible work rates and know the law to a T. They know every inside and out, understand the legislation, and they can even predict what they can imagine will be coming the next few months and next few years.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a key thing to take away. There's not a cookie cutter lawyer or solicitor.
Yeah.
You can have different personalities and bring something unique to the law profession. So don't feel that, oh, I don't know, like I'm too introverted or I'm not this hardcore extrovert like the law can't be for me. So I think I'd love to ask if there's someone listening to this thinking that, okay, that sounds interesting, law, specifically becoming a solicitor. What advice would you give to particularly young people?
Or even parents.
Or parents, yeah.
Like, if you're, again, why, if, some parent their child has an opportunity to do what you're doing or go to Cambridge, why is a Norton Rose Fulbright solicitor degree apprenticeship better than going to Cambridge and doing law?
The firm comes with associated prestige, and I think that's what the end point of a Cambridge and Oxford degree would be. The candidates who go to Oxbridge and they come out with the first, they end up at firms like mine. And if your end point is to end up at a firm like mine, then imagine doing that but 4 years earlier than them. And that's the sort of way that I look at it.
Mm-hmm.
And you're doing that 4 years earlier than them, so you get 4 more years to like make a name for yourself, which is really important. Because I think the great pity would be to go to Oxbridge to join a firm and then just to be another face. You do want to have your own personality, and that's one thing that I would say. An apprenticeship allows you to be known within your firm, to be an established figure, to be someone that people will actually look out for. Is so-and-so in, let's speak to so-and-so, let's get so-and-so involved in the project.
Yeah.
And I think that's like the biggest draw. What I would recommend to parents as well is just having a bit of faith in your children. I know it's very hard to like let go and stuff, but sometimes I do feel like students know what's best. And I think if your child is picking a solicitor or any apprenticeship, a degree apprenticeship over university, you have to break it down, and are they actually losing anything? Because if you're getting the degree, if you're getting the apprenticeship, then I think just a degree is a loss. I think it's actually a negative in the equation.
Yeah. As always, there's so many more questions we'd love to ask.
And the last one we will have to ask is, where can people find you? How do I join ACE Insights?
Obviously, I'm very thankful for you to ask that. LinkedIn, unfortunately, is where I am at most of the time. I'm quite responsive. But in terms of having the most impact and stuff, that is ACE Insights. We're on Instagram. The website is also ACE Insights. We're also on LinkedIn. And if you ever have a question about apprenticeships, we're literally one DM away. And we're very excited to announce, actually, that the 27th of this month, we have a finance work experience with a wealth management company. They've only ever done events for the children of clients. And this is the first time that they've given us 15 spaces to choose students of our choice. So we're incredibly excited to announce that we have 15 students of free school meal backgrounds who are attending. And I think that's fantastic.
Well, for all the folks at home, you've heard it here. Go apply now. Thanks for watching the Apprentago podcast. New episodes will be available every Friday at 5 p.m. GMT. If you enjoyed, then please leave a like and make sure to rate us 5 stars. It's been your host, Carlo. Take care.